scale.
Well,
And,
I had Ed Moy come on, who was the latest director of the U.S. Mint, and he's really into automated, Bitcoin and things. And we talked about all the different global, all the different countries, not all, but a lot of them, and how they perceive Bitcoin and how they perceive automated or electronic currency. Some countries absolutely want it because they want to control every single currency, like the
Scandinavian countries have already converted.
That's who I'm thinking of. They want it because they can control every transaction and they can control everything that goes on in their society. They want that. They want to control it. Now, Russia and China and stuff they don't like the notion of Bitcoin because they can't control it and they're afraid of it. Yeah. And the United States is kind of in between. And it's a very interesting thing on how this stuff is going to go. I mean, it could be a nightmare for us, or wheeling a nightmare where they control everything, or it could be more like Bitcoin where it's democratic and it's not controlled, but we have to be careful.
Right. Well, the same principle is also true for the internet. Because we're looking at right now, ICANN is about to hand over the authority of DNS to the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And because it has lost its permission to remain the antitrust, to be protected against antitrust law, because it's basically so in order to evade that, it's going to no longer be under U.S. law. It's going to be under UN law. And so this could allow countries to censor large, their own domain, chunks of the internet. And it's scary,
Which they already do. Some of them already censor a lot of things.
Yes. China does. I was there, and Google was not.
Well, Skype, you can't use Skype in India because they want to track all their phone calls and they can't do it through Skype. So there's a lot of different countries that do really, that are. Right.
So the way to avoid, to circumvent that is blockchain technology applied to the internet. And there are sites, there are platforms now where you can do this. And one is to get a .bit domain. I'm going to learn more about this. This was in a recent Corbett Report broadcast. And there's another company called MadeSafe.net that not only does they have their own cryptocurrency, and they have you can do all kinds of banking and make your website completely decentralized, from the centralized internet. Now, my question is if you get a .bit website, is it going to end up on the dark web like my Icelandic website did?
Yeah, because you don't want to be on the dark web.
No, you don't want to be on the dark web. Right.
Except criminals that know how to get on that. That's not what you want.
Exactly. So that's where I found myself. I was on the dark web without realizing it. I sort of found out. I mean, I was like, what's going on here? And I realized, yeah, I am on the dark web. I made a joke that I was on the dark web. And then I was in the many different people that I spoke to about, getting my site back up and being reborn. I spoke to one of the founders of Anonymous, and he, I joked, yeah, having this IS domain is like being on the dark web. He said, no, it isn't like being on the dark web. It technically is on the dark web.
So there you are. And then you got yourself off of it as fast as you could, which was smart. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So you're fun to talk to. So what are the biggest issues that you see surfacing lately? Some of the biggest news stories that the mainstream media are not covering that are really important for people to know.
Well, right now, the story about Hillary is just sucking up all the oxygen. That's this week. Next week it'll be something else. But there are some stories that are happening. For example, Obama just extended there's the Zika story that I told you about. That's not really getting even enough coverage on the internet, in my opinion. I've done what I can, but like I said, people just don't care about Brazil. It's very weird. There's like this cone of silence or something that's been placed over the country by the United States. It's unbelievable. I've been watching it my whole life. I was born here and I'm a dual citizen, and it's just incredible. It's like, how can nobody know that Brazil exists? It's like this huge country and it's this huge industrial power, and nobody's, people just think it's like coconuts and bananas or something. It's really crazy.
People don't have
they make more they're the second largest manufacturer of aircraft. Okay, I mean they make more cars than anybody. They used to make before China happened. Actually, before China turned into China, Brazil was China. Brazil was the biggest manufacturer of shoes and whatever.
They export the most. I don't know anymore, but I know for years they were the biggest exporter of granite. The building material.
Like that. And still, now they're still the biggest exporters of meat. Beef, pork, and chicken and things like that. I mean, they're just agricultural and industrial and raw.
Well, they're huge like too. That. Land territory. I mean, they have such a huge chunk of South America. So
it's actually bigger than the continental United States.
Yeah, they're huge, and so they have so many resources, and they have. Let's face it, they have pretty cheap labor. So which is why they were like China.
Right, and then basically, China just has 10 times more people or whatever.
So they can compete. Yeah, I know. You can get, I saw some story where you can get, 10 workers for the price of one in Mexico, and you can get 50 for the price of one in China. So that's why people were migrating from Mexico to China. It's just crazy.
Oh my God, I hadn't heard about that. But
this was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was the currency manipulation that was doing that also.
Sure.
So between, virtually slave labor and the manipulation of the currency, nobody could compete. But there was a lot of Western investment that allowed that to happen. China, the big enemy, the commie, the pinko terror, this thing that justified the Vietnam War and everything. All of a sudden we're over there and we're investing in creating, the Chinification of America and, the products.
Yes.
I mean, the complete outsourcing of our manufacturing base that was done by our own corporation. It looks like
I don't think that was planned in the sense of, some big conspiracy theory as much as you just save money. So they go there. I mean, I really think it was like Ross Perot saying there's going to be a big sucking sound if we do the NAFTA agreement. It's just such basic human behavior. Of course.
Well, it's a law that knows the basic human behavior that gets passed, and then the human behavior happens. So it's not like the corporations scammed anybody. It's whoever made the laws and whoever was behind the laws.
Yeah, they knew that what they were going to do was going to motivate that. They knew that. Yeah. So, what do you think about Julian Assange being everywhere lately?
I think it's great, actually, because he's suffered a lot, and talk about someone who really, and you can see that he looks better now. Like when you'd see him last year and year before, he had this beard, he looked puffy, he looked like he was drinking or something, and and what else is there to do if you're like holed up in 2 rooms of the Ecuadorian, you're in solitary confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy. But now there have been a few new breakthroughs, the DNC hack and this is one of the biggest stories. You were asking me what the biggest stories that aren't really being talked about in the mainstream, and that would be the TPP, the TPIP, and the TSA, whatever it is, the other T.
Sure,
the big T's.
The big a trade agreement.
Yes, which basically would be a parallel legal system for those companies that are mostly U.S. based, and it would allow corporations to sue governments for anything that would threaten their profits, which is completely, talk about corporate fascism. It's crazy. And another thing that you notice is that all the BRICS countries are written out of the agreement. In fact, the agreement is directly competing against all of those countries. For example, it's trying to get all of Brazil's regional trading partners to trade with the United States instead of with Brazil. And the same with regional partners of China, regional partners of India, South Africa. It's the same tactic being waged against all the BRICS alliance countries who are not part of the TPP.
It seems like there's a big scrambling globally to create. It's almost like there's three factions in the world, and of who can control the world, and so all these trade agreements are, creating more power within these factions. It's very interesting. It's also behind the dollar. I was talking to Irving Goldman, who used to be a top strategic person at J.P. Morgan, and he was charged or accused of being remember the London whale incident? He was the person at J.P. Morgan who they accused of it, and he got smeared all over the media. But he was put in charge of the strategic. I don't remember exact title he had, but he was a big corporate to-do. But he was only there for 4 months. Next thing you know, he got pinned for this thing and smeared all over the media. And then, within 6 months, he's gone, and he's like hosed. And
like 30 or 40 executives of J.P. Morgan also are jumping out of windows too, all over the world.
Yeah, well, it was crazy, but this guy got blamed for everything, and he was only there for a little bit. And it just seems, I saw some articles talking about that as well, but the regular media was blaming him for it, the mass media. And but anyways, he's been a regular guest on my show, and he talks about the money being there's really three factions that are controlling the money situation, that are fighting for control. And he was saying it's kind of like the U.S. There's an EU.
Yeah, the Anglosphere. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's
the EU is a separate one.
Yeah, he says there's an EU component, and then there's the Russian Chinese component. But I think the Brazil and company are kind of more with the Russian China component.
Yes. They are. Yeah, that's the BRICS alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yeah, so those are there's three different factions there, and you wouldn't know that the EU and that there's an EU one separate from the US, but there really is. There's three different. That's what he's saying. Yeah,
well, that makes sense. I mean, the EU. It'll be very interesting to see how all this shakes out. The EU has been chafing under the feet of the United States since the end of the Second World War. And I told you about that story about the German news anchor who just said, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to take the CIA money anymore and lie to you, tell you their version of reality." And I think there are some, because basically the way the U.S. does this, maintains this strong, this control of the EU, is by bribing the key people. That's not only in the EU but around the world. They keep control of countries around the world, largely by bribing them. And then, of course, we have over 800 military bases, all encircling Iran and Russia. And it's really quite amazing when you look at our military presence around the world. It's shocking.
It is. I just did a show on it.
all our tax dollars are going, and how we really, as a civilization, the United States, the cost of empire is really destroying us. We're slipping our educational standards and our literacy and basic and even medical stuff is.
Well, that's why
we're supposed to be number one. We're not even close to number one on any number of those kinds of metrics.
Exactly. That's why I like Trump talking about we need really strong defense, for ourselves. But do we really need to be providing everybody else's defense? And how aggressive we're making ourselves less safe by going out there and being so aggressive. That's not national defense.
No. What it is it's that's like a faction within the United States, which so the defense contractors and elements within, not the entirety of, but within the military intelligence part of our government is, I think you could call it the Fourth Reich. I mean, we did import a lot of SS officers